Tokyo Music Lab music trivia you can use starting tomorrow.
Okay, do you know Aerosmith?
Of course, I know.
Do you know the name of the vocalist?
Do
you know why it's so acclaimed musically?
Oh!
Did you know that they love Japanese taiyaki and eat it before concerts?
What? Regular distribution every Monday and Thursday, and chat session Tokyo Backstage every Saturday. Search for Tokyo Music Lab in your podcast app.
Don't miss it.
Nippon Broadcasting System Disaster Prevention Podcast, Preparing for the Nankai Trough Earthquake, Part 4. This is Midori Hakozaki, Nippon Broadcasting System. This podcast was planned to provide listeners with correct knowledge about the Nankai Trough earthquake in response to the Nankai Trough earthquake extra information issued in August 2024. We hope that you will add this program to your favorites and listen to it in case of an emergency. In Part 1, we talked about the Nankai Trough earthquake. In Part 2, we talked about the Nankai Trough earthquake extra information. And in Part 3, we talked about what to do when the extra information is issued. In Part 4, we will learn more about what to do in the event of a megathrust earthquake, such as the Nankai Trough. Our interviewer is Mr. Yoshiaki Fukuyama, Director for Disaster Prevention, Cabinet Office, Government of Japan. Mr. Fukuyama, thank you very much for your time.
Yes. My name is Fukuyama. I'm in charge of disaster prevention in the Cabinet Office. Please continue.
From what you have said so far, I understand that, unfortunately, it is inevitable that a major earthquake will occur, so it is important for us to understand correctly that there is a high possibility that a huge earthquake will occur to some extent, and to be prepared so that we can respond properly when and if it does come. In the previous interview, we asked you about what you can do to prepare in advance to reduce the damage as much as possible. First of all, what is the first thing you should do or think about when you feel a tremor?
Yes, earthquake damage is caused by a variety of phenomena that all come together at once. The first thing that comes first is a strong tremor, so the first thing we must do is to avoid injuries, death, or serious injuries that could lead to death from this tremor. We believe that everything depends on the countermeasures against shaking. If we fail to do so, we will not be able to evacuate from a tsunami and we will not be able to control fires. Therefore, I think it is very important to prepare for tremors first and foremost. This depends on the location of the earthquake. When an earthquake occurs, the Japan Meteorological Agency will issue an earthquake early warning, so if you see or hear this, I would like you to take actions to protect yourself.
People say things like, get under your desk, or protect your head.
Yes, that's right. This will vary considerably depending on where you are when you see or hear about it. If you are indoors, as you mentioned before, you can go under a desk or protect your head. If you are driving a car, you can calmly pull over to the side of the road or stop the car. If you are outside, the first thing you should do is to protect yourself.
Protect your head with a bag or something, or go to the center of the road. But is it dangerous?
This is also very detailed, so there is no one-size-fits-all rule, especially in urban areas. There is a possibility that a window of a building may break and pieces of glass may fall from the window. Therefore, it is advisable to evacuate to a place where you can protect your head and overhead, such as a roof.
To prepare for earthquakes, we need to make preparations in advance. For example, we should fasten our furniture and update our house to meet earthquake-resistant standards.
Yes, that's right. Furniture should be securely fastened. I think it is also important to update buildings to meet the new earthquake-resistant standards.
And it will take quite a while for the shaking to subside?
Yes, it does. In the case of a large earthquake, the duration of shaking is also longer. For example, in Tokyo at the time of the Great East Japan earthquake, there was a long, slow shaking that lasted for a few minutes, almost 2 or 3 minutes, and even reached Osaka and the Kinki region, where the shaking continued for a long time.
Tall buildings were shaking all the time, even in Osaka.
Yes, it was.
And what should you do first when the shaking stops and you start moving?
This depends on where you live. If you live near the sea, the first thing you should do is to evacuate from the tsunami. Of course, it is a matter of course for you to evacuate yourself, but you should also encourage your neighbors to evacuate as a whole community. It is also important to know in advance which evacuation site to go to, whether it is better to go to a tsunami evacuation building or a tsunami evacuation tower, or to head for higher ground if there is enough time to do so. If it takes some time, it may be better to go to higher ground.
Do you make this decision according to the tsunami warning or tsunami advisory, based on the information on how many meters the tsunami will reach by how many minutes, in combination with the location where you are?
Yes, the estimated time of arrival of a tsunami is announced in the tsunami warning and tsunami advisory, but this is only a guideline, so please do not take it easy just because there is still some time left before the tsunami reaches your location.
Is it often said that to prevent a fire, you have to stop the fire or put out the fire?
Yes, there is. When evacuating from a tsunami, or even if not from a tsunami, there is a concern that fires may be caused by electrical current when evacuating from a damaged building. The best way to prepare in advance is to install seismic breakers and other such devices. In fact, when you leave the building after an accident, there is a possibility that an electrical fire may occur when you return from a power outage. So please make sure to turn off the circuit breaker before leaving the area and evacuating.
If you live along the coast, I think you should evacuate immediately in case of a possible tsunami, whether it is night or winter. In other areas where there is no tsunami danger, how about evacuation at night or in winter?
This also varies from place to place. Now, for example, taking urban areas as an example, there are areas along the Nankai Trough, especially in the Chubu region near Nagoya and in the Kinki region near Osaka. In these large cities, there are many people living in condominiums and buildings. It is very important for all residents to take earthquake countermeasures for their condominiums and buildings in advance. But if you have to evacuate because of damage to the building, or if the building is no longer usable, please do not hesitate to do so. However, if everyone in an apartment or building evacuates at the same time, there is a high possibility that the evacuation center that should be used will be over capacity. Therefore, buildings where many people live, such as condominiums and buildings, need to be earthquake-proofed in advance, or have seismic isolation or base-isolated structures, or have countermeasures against long-period seismic motion.
Long-period seismic motion, that shaking that makes buildings shake in circles. Why does that happen?
The larger the earthquake is, the more likely it is to cause long-period shaking, which is called resonance, rather than short-period shaking, which tends to be transmitted over a relatively long distance. It tends to be transmitted relatively far. In the case of the Great East Japan earthquake, the quake occurred off the coast of Sanriku in the northeastern part of Japan. Of course, short, small tremors do not travel that far, but long, slow tremors from long-period earthquakes tend to travel far. So they were transmitted as far as the Kanto region, or more specifically, the Kinki region. The long and slow shaking did not affect wooden structures or one-story buildings very much, but it did not cause any damage. However, long and slender buildings and high-rise structures tend to shake together. Therefore, long-period seismic motions are more likely to affect buildings with large number of floors.
Can this be addressed in advance?
The Great East Japan earthquake was the first time that this was noticeable. Since long-period seismic motions have been observed in earthquakes since then, I believe that further technological development is needed in this area.
You mentioned earlier that people living in condominiums evacuate all at once, but as is the case with condominiums, where do you make the decision to evacuate or not?
First of all, it is difficult to say what the criteria are, but I think it is necessary to first determine how much damage has been done to the building. In addition to that, there is the lifeline system. How is the water supply in the condominium? How is the sewage system? Is the electricity working? Is there an emergency power supply? And are there reserves? After inspecting these aspects, we would like you to confirm whether or not you can continue to live in the apartment.
I understand that some people will go to evacuation centers after the earthquake, while others will try to return home.
I believe that the Nankai Trough earthquake is one such earthquake, but that the number of people who have difficulty returning home will be particularly high in the event of an earthquake directly under the Tokyo metropolitan area. Rather than going home, I would rather you stay where you are. I think that the basic idea is to stay at the place where you go to work, school, or office. If everyone starts moving at the same time, it will cause traffic jams and chaos. In particular, the 72-hour period required for life-saving and emergency operations could be seriously disrupted. We understand that you want to get home to your family as quickly as possible, but from the standpoint of saving lives, we think it would be better for you to hold your position and wait at work or school for a while, and then move gradually when public transportation such as trains and buses start moving to a certain extent.
I think it is important to stay where you are at first, in the event of an earthquake in an urban area. It is certainly the idea of giving way to emergency vehicles. Recently, I have also heard a lot about disaster prevention stations. Is this also a recent development?
Although there is no certainty as to when this trend began, it is possible that the number of such stations equipped with emergency supplies will continue to increase throughout the region, especially at the initiative of local governments. I would like to see more and more stations equipped with such emergency supplies throughout the region, especially at the initiative of the local government.
What about lifelines?
Yes, electricity is very important, especially considering the current energy situation.
If there were to be a large-scale power outage in this extremely hot weather, which we are recording in August, I think it would be a very worrisome situation.
I think it would be very worrisome, so we need to be prepared on a daily basis and take measures according to the season. If it is the middle of August when we are recording, it is necessary to stockpile items that will help you cool down. It is necessary to stockpile such items as well as drinking water and salt. I believe that heat stroke countermeasures are an extension of heat stroke countermeasures, but I would like to see more stockpiling in terms of stockpiling, not just on a day-to-day basis.
Do you have a guideline for how many days' worth of provisions to stockpile?
Basically, we are thinking of 3 days. However, there is a wide range depending on each disaster. For example, the Noto Peninsula earthquake that occurred in January this year was in a hypothetical area and was located on a peninsula. The geographical restrictions were very large. Even in areas along the Nankai Trough, there are some peninsular areas that are difficult to access. We would like to ask those who live in such areas to further check the amount and contents of their stockpiles.
Do you have a rough estimate of when lifelines will be restored?
I believe that each lifeline operator has its own guideline. For example, in the case of the Nankai Trough earthquake, the wide area is a characteristic of the area, so I think that the companies will prioritize their response. Therefore, it is difficult to say whether or not we will be able to meet the target without an actual earthquake. We have said a minimum of 3 days, but we would like you to have enough stockpiles for a longer period of time.
Do you think it would be better to have a larger stockpile?
I think it is better to be well prepared.
It is said that it is difficult to see how long the evacuation life will continue.
This also depends on the earthquake and the situation. Above all, the lives that survived the earthquake and tsunami are still intact. The government is providing what it calls push-type support in terms of stockpiling and living in evacuation shelters. However, it will take time to deliver them. So, until the supplies arrive, we hope that local residents can somehow connect with each other through preparedness. We have experienced in the past earthquake disasters that poor living conditions in evacuation centers can lead to disaster-related deaths. We should discuss with local residents how we should set up evacuation centers and how we should prepare facilities to prevent disaster-related deaths. I hope that you will consider this point carefully through various evacuation drills and disaster drills.
As you just mentioned, it is true that you may not have the opportunity to participate in evacuation drills or disaster drills unless you work in a related field. I think it is important to prepare for such drills through actual simulations, so I would like to hear more from you. Thank you very much, Mr. Fukuyama.
Thank you very much.
So far, we have asked Mr. Fukuyama, who is in charge of disaster prevention in the Cabinet Office, about the Nankai Trough earthquake and what we should do in the event of a huge earthquake that is bound to happen in the future. Nippon Broadcasting System has archived this podcast, so if you have listened to it once, we hope you will add it to your favorites and check back when the time comes. This is Midori Hakozaki from Nippon Broadcasting System.
Tokyo Music Lab music trivia you can use starting tomorrow.
Okay, do you know Aerosmith?
Of course, I know.
Do you know the name of the vocalist? Do you know why it's so acclaimed musically?
Oh!
Did you know that they love Japanese taiyaki and eat it before concerts?
What? Regular distribution every Monday and Thursday, and chat session Tokyo Backstage every Saturday. Search for Tokyo Music Lab in your podcast app.
Don't miss it.